can't no nigga hurt me worse than I already been hurt. I lost my mama, my daddy, my brother, my sister, my grandmother, my grandfather, my grandmothers on both sides, my partners. I'm already dead, nigga, inside. So this little funny shit that I chose music, I'm not tripping.
For years, Birdman stood at the top of hip-hop like a final boss. Private jets, Diamond covered everything. A roster so stacked it looked like an all-star lineup. If rap had royalty, Birdman wasn't just in the room, he owned the building. And then, something went wrong. Very wrong. Because one minute, he was the mastermind behind an empire that printed money. The next minute, his name started popping up next to words nobody wants attached to their legacy. Lawsuits, betrayals, public fallout. Former protégés turning into loudest critics. The kind of downfall that doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in, hides behind success, and then collapses the whole structure at once. This wasn't just bad business. This wasn't just artists leaving. This was a slow-motion tragedy where every move made things worse. Every silence got louder, and every flex started looking like overcompensation. The same man who once decided careers with a phone call suddenly found himself explaining, defending, and dodging questions that wouldn't go away. And here's the wild part. None of this came from outsiders. It came from the inside, from people he helped build, from voices that once called him family. If this story is even half true, it makes music industry success stories look like fairy tales with missing pages. Because what happened to Birdman wasn't just a fall dot to understand how Birdman allegedly lost everything. You have to rewind to a time when losing wasn't even in his vocabulary. Back then, Birdman didn't chase power. Power chased him. Cash Money wasn't just a label, it was a factory. A hit-making assembly line that turned unknown kids into millionaires and made the rest of the industry stare in disbelief. If you wanted a career, you went through him. If you wanted respect, you waited your turn. Birdman's rise looked untouchable. Southern rap domination. Diamond Records. Artists who weren't just successful, but culturally unavoidable. He sold the image of loyalty, family, and we all eat. And for a long time, people believed it. Not because it sounded good, but because the money backed it up. Success silences doubt better than any PR team ever could. But here's where the tragedy starts. When you're winning that hard, nobody questions the rules. Nobody asks for receipts. Nobody checks the paperwork. They just assume the system works because the check's clear. And that assumption is exactly where the cracks begin. Behind the scenes, whispers started long before the explosions. Quiet complaints, delayed payments, confusing contracts. Artists brushing things off because they were young, rich, and convinced loyalty mattered more than legal clarity. When you're 20 and famous, paperwork feels optional. Birdman benefited from that mentality more than anyone. The first real tension didn't come from enemies. It came from inside the house. From artists who started realizing that success didn't automatically mean ownership, that plaques didn't equal control, that family didn't always mean fairness. And once those thoughts creep in, they don't leave quietly. What made Birdman's situation unique wasn't just the accusations. It was the confidence with which he dismissed them. Anytime questions popped up, he leaned harder into the persona. More jewelry, bigger statements, more we good. In hip-hop, bravado can buy time. And Birdman bought a lot of it. But bravado doesn't erase resentment. It just delays confrontation. As the years passed, former protégés started maturing. They learned the business. They talked to lawyers. They compared notes. And that's when things stopped feeling like misunderstandings and started feeling like patterns. Patterns are dangerous because they turn individual complaints into collective narratives, publicly. Birdman stayed quiet or defiant. Privately, relationships began to fracture. Meetings didn't feel the same. Trust thinned. Loyalty turned conditional. And when artists who helped build an empire start questioning the foundation, the entire structure gets shaky. The internet didn't help. Old interviews resurfaced. Statements that once sounded confident now felt dismissive. Moments that were brushed off years ago suddenly looked incriminating when viewed through a new lens. History got re-edited in real time. Birdman's biggest mistake wasn't necessarily what he did, it was what he refused to address early. In industries built on perception, silence doesn't equal innocence. It equals suspicion. And suspicion spreads faster than facts ever could. As stories started circulating, fans took sides. Some defended Birdman as a visionary misunderstood by ungrateful artists. Others painted him as the villain hiding behind contracts and intimidation. The truth, as always, lived somewhere messier in between. But mess doesn't go viral, conflict does. What turned whispers into warning signs was repetition. Multiple voices telling similar stories. Different artists, same frustrations. Different eras, same complaints. At that point, it stopped being coincidence and started being narrative. And narratives are powerful. They rewrite legacies faster than time ever could. Birdman, once a symbol of success, slowly became the symbol of a cautionary tale. The mogul who built an empire but allegedly forgot that empires require maintenance, transparency, and evolution. You can't run a billion-dollar operation like it's still a street hustle forever. Eventually, the streets talk back by the end. Of this phase, the cracks weren't hidden anymore. They were visible, loud, impossible to ignore. And the people who once stood behind Birdman started standing across from him instead. This wasn't the collapse yet. This was the warning tremor. And like every great tragedy, the signs were there long before the fall, ignored, dismissed, and buried under success until it was too late. Once the cracks stopped being whispers, everything accelerated. That's how collapses work. Slow, slow, slow. Then, all at once. The moment former allies started speaking publicly, Birdman's empire didn't just look shaky, it looked exposed. And exposure is dangerous in an industry that survives on intimidation, image, and the illusion of control suddenly. The stories weren't isolated anymore, they stacked. Different voices, same complaints. Delayed money, ownership, confusion. Contracts nobody fully understood until it was too late. And the most damaging part wasn't even the allegations themselves. It was how consistent they sounded. Consistency turns rumor into reckoning. The internet smelled blood instantly. Old clips resurfaced like receipts pulled from a dusty filing cabinet. Interviews where Birdman laughed off concerns now felt icy instead of confident. Quotes that once sounded bossed up suddenly read like red flags. Time has a cruel way of changing context. And Birdman's past confidence didn't age well under new scrutiny. Memes followed. Because humiliation is how the internet processes downfall. People joked that cash money had turned into no cash, no money. Savage? Absolutely. Effective? Even more. Because jokes stick longer than legal documents. Once a mogul becomes a meme, respect evaporates faster than assets in a bad deal. The reactions from artists were louder now, but some were careful, choosing words that felt lawyer-approved. Others were reckless, unloading years of frustration in interviews and live streams. The family narrative collapsed publicly, and once that myth died, everything else followed. Birdman's response pattern didn't help. Instead of adapting, he doubled down. Defiance over reflection. Silence over clarity. In the short term, that posture looks strong. In the long term, it looks guilty, or worse, outdated. The industry had evolved. Transparency mattered. Paperwork mattered. And Birdman was still playing by old rules in a new era. Industry insiders started distancing themselves. Quietly, subtly. No dramatic fallouts, just fewer cosigns. Fewer public endorsements. Fewer doors opening automatically. In hip-hop, that's the real punishment. You don't get canceled loudly. You get ignored slowly. Meanwhile, the money narrative turned ugly. Lawsuits and disputes dragged his name into places it had never been before. Legal paperwork instead of charts. That shift alone damages reputation. Success looks different when it has to explain itself in court. The irony was brutal. Birdman built his empire by understanding leverage better than almost anyone. But leverage only works when the people beneath you still believe in the system. Once belief collapses, leverage becomes liability. Fans began reevaluating everything. Albums, collaborations, legacy moments. What once felt iconic now felt complicated. People asked uncomfortable questions. Who really benefited? Who really got paid? And who was just the face of someone else's profit machine? The memes got darker, the commentary sharper. What started as business criticism slowly morphed into character assassination. The internet doesn't stop at facts, it adds seasoning. And Birdman became the perfect target. Rich, powerful, silent, and surrounded by angry former allies. At this point, the narrative had fully flipped. He was no longer the mastermind. He was the cautionary example. The mogul whose refusal to evolve allegedly cost him everything that mattered. Trust, loyalty, and influence. And influence is the real currency. Once it's gone, the money doesn't. Hit the same. The jewelry looks heavier. The flexes feel forced. The confidence sounds defensive. Birdman's tragedy wasn't just financial or legal. It was cultural. He went from feared to questioned. From respected to debated. And in hip-hop, being debated is the beginning of the end. By the end of this phase, empire still existed on paper, but spiritually, it was hollowed out. The people who gave it life had moved on, and the audience was no longer convinced the story had a happy ending. Happy ending. By the time the dust began to settle, it became painfully clear that this wasn't just a bad chapter in Birdman's career. It was the ending of an era. Not with fireworks, with a dramatic announcement, but with silence, distance, and a slow realization that the throne no longer carried the same weight. This is how power really disappears. Not stolen, not destroyed, just ignored. Birdman still had money, still had jewelry, still had the name, but the energy was gone. The phone didn't ring the same. The respect wasn't automatic, and the fear that evaporated completely. In hip-hop, fear and respect often walk hand in hand, and once one leaves, the other isn't far behind. Former artists didn't just move on, they thrived without him. That was the quiet dagger. Nothing exposes a mogul faster than seeing the people he once controlled succeed without his permission. It reframes the entire story. Suddenly, Birdman wasn't the engine, he was the toll booth. And once artists found another route, they never looked back. The public perception hardened. Not because of one lawsuit or one interview, but because of accumulation. Too many stories, too many similar complaints, too many burned bridges. When patterns repeat long enough, people stop asking what if and start saying, of course. And Birdman's response, or lack of one, that became the final nail. No accountability tour, no transparent breakdown, no evolution. Just stubborn silence mixed with old-school bravado that no longer landed. In a new era where moguls rebrand, apologize, and adapt, Birdman stayed frozen in time, still playing by rules the game had already abandoned. the industry moved on without ceremony. No public exile, no grand fallout. Just fewer invitations, fewer cosigns, fewer artists willing to attach their futures to a legacy now seen as toxic. That's the most brutal consequence of all. Becoming optional fans who once idolized the cash money era started talking about it in past tense. Not with nostalgia, but with caution. Younger artists referenced Birdman as a warning, not a blueprint. That shift alone rewrote his legacy more effectively than any headline ever could. What makes this tragedy hit harder is that it was avoidable. Transparency, fair deals, adaptation, even a single moment of humility. Early on could have changed everything. But arrogance has a shelf life, and Birdman's expired in public. The money didn't save him. The image didn't protect him. The empire didn't defend itself, because empires don't collapse when the walls fall. They collapse when the people inside stop believing in them. Birdman didn't lose everything overnight. He lost it piece by piece. Trust first, loyalty second, influence last. And by the time he realized what was gone, there was nothing left to fight for except a legacy already rewritten. This wasn't just a business failure. It was a cultural one. A reminder that hip-hop doesn't just reward success, it punishes stagnation. Loudly, ruthlessly, permanently, and the cruel irony. The man who once decided who ate is now remembered as the reason. People learned to cook for themselves. That's the real tragedy. Not the fall, not the lawsuits, not the headlines, but the fact that when the story of Birdman is told now, it's no longer about how he built an empire. It's about how he lost it. And this is where the story stops being history and starts being a warning. Because Birdman's saga isn't just about one man losing control. It's about what happens when power goes unchecked, when loyalty is cued. When loyalty is cued, when loyalty is cued, and loyalty is cued. As a lost caster, lives. Lie skewed my nuckin' love, because my loss cued mighty to sell some of the elf. My loss cade with caliture side, we care. 8 paid, when lies pun with sit, with C's, K, kawobake, cade sick bed, clay psid. I add my cot, but we connide to side by not sickly at sick asai resit sit aka to kusai me let sits diskeka but it flows it kutu it sits to with to I back but kick sit to stuck with 6 dead the bay does it but it's snitches it with head to get sense but assumed instead of earned, and when success convinces someone they're untouchable. If this breakdown had you thinking, I've seen this pattern before, that's not an accident. Hip-hop is full of rise and fall stories. This one just played out louder, so here's what I need from you. If this video kept you locked in, if it made you rethink how moguls really move behind the scenes, smash that like button like it owes you back royalties. Don't tap it gently. Hit it with purpose. The algorithm only respects impact, just like the industry. Now drop your real thoughts in the comments. Not the polite version, the honest one. Was Birdman a visionary who lost control of his empire? Or was the collapse inevitable the moment transparency got ignored? Do you think his legacy deserves more nuance? Or is this exactly how history should remember it? I want every unfiltered opinion, because the comment section is where the real conversations happen. And if you're new here, don't just watch and disappear. Subscribe, because stories like this don't end with one video. They echo, they overlap. They resurface every time another empire starts cracking. This channel exists to break down the truth behind the money, the loyalty behind the contracts, and the silence behind the headlines. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next expose, the next downfall. or the next moment where hip-hop history gets rewritten in real time. Remember, power fades, receipts don't, and the loudest legacies are usually built on the quietest mistakes. This is where the myths get stripped down. This is where the truth gets uncomfortable. Welcome to Rap Truth.